Are you loving the Categorically Romance podcast? Are you looking for even more places to get your romance fix? Do you rewatch When Harry Met Sally every fall?
Yeah, we thought so. Check out Meet Cute's newest podcast, The Rom-Com Room, where rom-com connoisseurs Kendra and Mercedes unite each Friday to nerd out about their favorite rom-coms, their love to hates, and every crush and romantic detail in between.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Bree.
And today we have with us author Caitlin Cruz. We are so excited you are joining us on the podcast today. Please tell us how your 2022 has been so far.
It's been pretty good. I had a landmark birthday and, I'm still here. So all is well.
Well, happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday. Well, are you ready to get into some icebreakers?
Oh, yeah, sure.
If you came with a warning label, what would it say?
Will tell the truth.
Will you share with us your experience of academia in England?
I could share it with you. I also wrote a book about it, though, too. So you could read that if you liked. So I went over to England to graduate school because I thought there had to be something better than the customer service representative life that I was leading at the time, which I felt really wasn't addressing what I wanted to do with my life, which was hang around, read books, and maybe write some stuff. So I thought, I know the only way to make a living doing that is clearly being a professor. So I thought I would sort of chase that down. So I went over to England and I studied, it was called Fictions of Conflict, and it was fascinating. And then I stayed on and did a PhD. But mostly I sat around in the pouring rain in the north of England for many, many, many years, writing about AIDS literature. So I was deeply depressed and basically read a lot of romance novels until I wrote my own.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, I love hearing academia stories.
Well, they say if you don't have a breakdown while you're doing your PhD, you're not really doing a PhD.
Understood.
I think I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, besides reading, what was one of your teenage obsessions?
George Michael. Yeah,
Oh
I
my
loved him.
gosh,
I had
yeah.
the 6 foot, you guys seem a lot younger than me. I had a 6 foot Wham, it's like 6 foot poster on my bedroom wall of Wham.
Love it.
And somehow it was not clear to me that there was a sexuality disconnect.
You know.
Not clear to me for a long time.
I think Careless Whispers, I mean, this may sound so cliche, but it is one of the most beautiful songs of all time.
I love that song.
Yeah.
I do. And I think so many of those pop songs back then probably are part of why I wanted to write about relationships in the first place. And that song is a really great example of that.
What's one of the first songs on the soundtrack to your life?
Well, as my brother once said when I asked him what his wedding song was, probably Welcome to the Jungle.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was his wedding song. I love it.
No, he just said that.
Okay.
Oh, that's a song that like you can play it out, but then like a couple years later you hear it again and you just play it out again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, we read on your website that you have your very passionate feelings about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. How would you convince someone who has yet to watch the show to give it a try?
Well, I would say that has recently become a more complicated conversation due to numerous revelations about Joss Whedon. However, I would also say that anyone who watched the show, that shouldn't have come as a huge surprise, given, say, the character of Xander. But, Buffy is such a fascinating character herself, and sort of, there are very few shows, I think, that adequately represent high school quite like that, or how you figure out who you are in life, or how you figure out what your actual gifts are. Is it a perfect show? No. But I find that it every time I revisit it, I find more in it, and I'm never disappointed. So that's what I would tell someone and hope that they would give it a try.
All right. Well, here's one that we didn't have on the list, but we need to hear this story from your perspective. So we've already got one perspective on it, but let me just set the stage here. So you and Maisie Yates are out shopping. You go into a bookstore and Marcella Bell is working there. So now give us what happened from your point of view.
You mean like hypothetically? Or when I first met Marcella?
When you first met Marcella Bell.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't actually with Macy Yates. I was with somebody else. But
Oh,
yeah, so
really?
we walked into the bookstore and I'll just tell you that we already knew that it didn't carry romance novels because, you can tell. So I already knew before I walked in that because, it was a little snooty independent bookstore. So I walked in and Marcella was behind the desk and I said, hi, we write romance. And this is my friend, Casey Lane, who wrote a few books. And so we said, we know that we're just wondering if you have romance novels or planning to carry them. There's a big, there's a romance group here in town. We meet all the time. And she was sort of looking down and it's this big sort of desk. And she's looking down. She's like, no, we don't. We don't carry them. And I was like, why not? And she said, oh, well, the owner prefers to have only trade books. And I sort of said, oh, why? And, this is before the rom-com sort of explosion. So there weren't a whole lot of romance novels in trade at that time. So I said, oh, all right, well, here's my card. I'd love it if you ever change your mind, and thought, well, obviously I'll never darken the door of this place again. And then a couple months later, the owner called me. I guess she emailed me and asked if I wanted to come in and chat with her about why she didn't carry romance novels. And that's when I hooked Macy in. And so Macy and I then went in because Macy has this steel trap of a mind and she can remember everything ever, including a lot of figures and things. And I'm argumentative. So between the two of us, we sat down with Eileen Bobeck, who is the owner of Rebel Heart Books here in Jacksonville, Oregon. And we had this long conversation with her. And she's this sort of remarkable human who is always happy to have the difficult conversation. And so she sat there and she said, well, one of the reasons I don't carry romance, even though she was a huge fan of, say, Kathleen Woody was back in the day, she said, is because I wouldn't even know how to choose a romance novel. And I sort of waved at the books surrounding us all around the book shop and said, well, how do you choose these?
How do you choose these, right?
And she was like, fair. And so then we gave her lists, and then we started a romance book club that's been going on for years now. I want to say 3 or 4 years. And it went through the pandemic. I mean, we went online, and then it's the first one that went back to the store, and it's just been this. And now, of course, Marcella's moved away, which we don't like to talk about because it's too sad. But so yeah, so that's ever since, just because, I guess Marcella didn't throw out the card when we left it with her.
That is just, to be a bookseller and then in walks, Caitlin Cruz. And then the next time she comes in, she brings Maisie Yates. It just, that doesn't happen to normal beings. So.
Well, I don't know that she knew who we were, though. So I'm not sure she was quite so impressed.
Yeah. Well, we love to hear romance origin stories. And on your website, you share that yours deals with like a thrift store bin and pirates. But can you share the story with us, how you became a romance reader?
Yeah, so it was, the 80s. And as far as I can recall, our parents threw us out of the house at dawn and told us to come back for dinner. So I was wandering around the streets of the town where I grew up, completely unsupervised. And I walked into a Woolworths, and I don't even know if they exist anymore. And there's this huge bin. And now as an author, I cringe at the word bin. But nonetheless, there was a huge bin of romance novels. And I guess I picked up the one on top. And it was this shiny picture. And it was it was not Fabio, but it was like all abs and a pectoral muscle situation and like, stripped to the waist and hanging off the mast of some ship. And I was like, I would like some of that, please. And so I bought it. I swear it was for like $1. Again, as an author now, I cringe, but at the time, oh, how exciting. So I read it and I had no idea that such books existed. And my tragedy is that I cannot remember who wrote that book, but I must have read it 100 times. And then I wanted nothing but more romance novels. And, my mother was not on board, but she said, I could have used one. So she used to drop me off at used bookstores, and I would crawl around in the back in the sections where they had all the category books and all the different novels. And I would just like load up on shopping bags filled with romance novels. And then I would just read and read and read. And many of the people I read then are now, hardcover type authors now. And it's just, that was some of the best times, I think, because there were so many category lines. there were so many people publishing different things. I didn't know any better. So I just read and read and read and read and read. And it was wonderful. I would go back and crawl around in those bookstores again today if I could.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The days of bins.
Bins. Now as an author, I'm like, I don't want my books in bins. I would prefer them to be on shelves. Like,
I want them on the shelf. Right.
Right. That was probably a bargain bin or like a remainder bin, but whatever. The innocence of youth.
Well, English as a Second Language was your debut with Grand Central Publishing in 2004 under your writing name, Megan Crane. What was your journey to being published like?
Well, so as I said, I was in the north of England, very depressed and trying to write a doctoral thesis on AIDS literature, which was very depressing. So obviously I amused myself by writing this other book, and I wrote this big, sort of ridiculous, practically 500-page magnum opus on going to graduate school, basically on going to graduate school in England, but it was fiction, very thinly veiled. And I sent it to a woman that I knew because we had gone to the same college, although we weren't close in college or anything. And I knew that because another friend of mine, who is now also a published author, but at the time was not, sent a book of hers to that woman who had become an agent. And said, oh, she gives really good feedback when she rejects you. So I thought, all right, well, after all this time, I'd like to know, because I'd been writing my whole life, in black and white notebooks, all the things, and just would write all these different stories. And I wasn't really good at finishing stories, but I wrote a lot. And so I thought, well, once and for all, I guess I'll see if I can actually become a writer. I didn't even know that was something you could choose to become. I thought it was sort of granted by a fairy somewhere or something. I don't know. And so I sent it off. And when she replied to me, she said, I would look at this again if you revised it. And I thought, well, my deathless prose, you must be kidding. But my friend said, oh, she didn't say that to me. She just said no to me. So you should probably do that. I was like, oh. So I asked her if she had any pointers. She gave me a few pointers, and then I revised it up and I sent it in, and she called me at sometime in December of that year, like over Christmas. I was home, so it was probably a little before Christmas or something, and said that she would love to represent me, and then sold that book, which was English as a Second Language, that April.
Oh my gosh.
So people hate hearing that story. It's like, really? I wrote 400 books and they were all rejected. But, I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I just didn't necessarily, I did all the writing that everyone does, and all the things that should have been rejected. I just didn't send them in.
What did the world of romance publishing look like as you were entering into it?
I mean, it was so different. So I didn't even realize what I was entering into, because I was sort of on the tail end of the chick lit, craze at the time. So that book came out in 2004, and chick lit had been going on since Bridget Jones came out a few years before that. So it was it was on a downward slope. Not that was clear to me at the time, but so yeah, I started with Grand Central, which was Time Warner at that time, and I was the first author that my agent had who wanted a website. So there wasn't even an online thing, really. I'm sure there were online spaces, but it wasn't quite as widely accessible as they are today. And there certainly wasn't social media in the same way. And so the first inkling I had about this big, broad romance world was when I went to the first RWA conference after I had sold. So I sort of went, it was in New York that year, and I sort of went with a friend of mine and skulked around and was like, that's Nora Roberts. She's so little. Sorry. And that was kind of it. And then the next time I went, so really RWA was my introduction and my only contact with the romance world for a while. Wow. And then sort of social media started happening. And so yeah, it was completely different. I had read a lot of category romance when I was growing up, but I didn't know much about it. I hadn't read it in a long time at that point. So I was writing chick lit, and I read all the big names at the time, and because my name was Crane, I was once seated next to Jennifer Cruzy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her, right?
Yeah.
Sitting next to her at a conference, which was hilarious. It was like, oh, allow me to direct her line. No one came near me. I didn't care. It was amazing. Just being that close to her, it was fantastic. Her books are so great.
Well, having come in at that time, I am always looking, because I was in high school when the chick lit was going on, and now I'm so interested in it. But when I ask people for recommendations, they recommend romantic comedies. What's the difference? Is there a difference?
No. Yeah. I think about that a lot. I think that they're both chasing the same idea. I think certainly the rom-com surge of late has definitely been more inclusive and more representative than of diversity than the first, which is fantastic. So I think that's certainly a factor. But I think the whole idea of telling these stories about, more people who are like the reader rather than more idealized notions of who heroines or heroes might be. I think that's part of what it always seems to be in rom-coms and chick lit, and I think they have that in common. But to be honest, I haven't read widely enough in the rom-coms to be able to sort of definitively say, oh, this is like chick lit for these reasons.
Okay. Yeah, like every time I pull up like a chick lit folder on Goodreads, like at the top of the list is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. And I'm like, I've read this. I thought it was a rom-com. Right. How is it chick lit? Like, what is the difference? So
to me, I'm not sure I don't think there is a difference. I think maybe I think chick lit was called that, came out of England with Bridget Jones, and then sort of swept around for a bit. But I think they called it chick lit, but it was derogatory. They didn't call it chick lit because they thought it was high literature. They called it that to diminish it, of course. Wow. And I think rom-com, since they use the term rom-com in Hollywood, and it really more just describes what the books are. My assumption is that it's maybe a little less of a derogatory moniker.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear what you enjoy about writing and being creative as both Megan Crane and Caitlin Cruz.
I can't believe that I get to do this all day, every day. So there's not, it just doesn't, I still remember so vividly being that 12-year-old with the bin in Woolworths and finding that book for the first time. And I remember so vividly, sitting in freezing cold New Jersey floors, reading category romances in secondhand bookstores. And to imagine that I am making books that people can pick up like that and read that way. I just feel so lucky that I try to remind myself of that when publishing gets in the way, but I'm just lucky. So yeah, I love it. I get to make stuff up in my head and then people read it and then want to talk to me about it. Wait, what's better than that?
Well, according to what we can see online, you wrote solely as Megan Crane until Pure Princess, Bartered Bride, your Harlequin Presents debut in February 2010. Can you share with us how writing for Harlequin came to be for you?
So I was writing I wrote a bunch of chick lit books, and then I also wrote a bunch of work for hire young adult books under various different names there were sort of more packaged things that you write into a series and you use the series name and that sort of thing. A lot of people do that, and it's great because you get flat fees and you can pay your rent. So that's fantastic. And then I thought, I wish that there were other things that I could do. And around that time, I guess Time Warner, I don't remember when Time Warner became Grand Central, but at some point they became Grand Central, and then they created something called the 5 Spot line, which was their chick lit line. That was, the fall of 2005, I think. I must have been. And so they gathered together everyone who was going to start writing for this new line, and that's where I met Jane Porter.
Miss Jane and I.
Yep. So Jane and I went out to dinner with our common editor and did not like the look of each other much, staring at each other across the table thinking, why she's so this, she's so that. And so I never thought I'd be friends with her. And then I ended up going to Hawaii because my in-laws are there, and it was for my I guess boyfriend at the time's mother was getting married. So I was over there for around Thanksgiving and met up with Jane again. And that time we got along a lot better. And I read every single one of her Harlequin Presents that she had written at that point over the next maybe 6 months. And I thought, I want to write something like this. Like, this is amazing. I remember lying on my bed reading, I always forget the name of this book. I think it's The Sheik's Disobedient Bride. And I remember lying on that bed and my back was sort of arching because I couldn't put it down. It was I was crying, kind of laughing. It was just amazing because, it's the perfect Jane Porter heroine who runs off into a sandstorm rather than be with this guy who sort of gallops after her into the night and swoops her up and sort of flings her in a cave, a sandstorm pounding around outside. And then, of course, obviously they kiss passionately. I was like, where has this been my whole life? I wonder, I didn't even know I could write like that. And so I tried my hand at it, and that turned into Pure Princess, bartered bride. So I managed to, it took a long time, but I managed to sell that to Harlequin Presents. And then when I did that, because it was so different from the kind of books I was writing, my agent and I thought that I should have a different name. And so for a long time, they were different, but now it's sort of all one big, just write anything kind of a thing, which is fun because I get to be more than one person. So,
well, it totally feels full circle because we had Miss Jane P on a few months ago, and it was because of her that we got the guts to actually message you. She's like, if you all have had Caitlin Cruz on, you have to reach out to her and have her. We're like, it's Caitlin fucking Cruz, Miss Jane P. Like, we're nervous about this.
What? Why?
Like, this is Caitlin Cruz.
Oh, that's so funny.
She's like, she just loves you. She's like, just reach out to her, you guys. So
she's the best. She's one of my favorite humans on this planet. You know, for a while in there, after there was a chick lit crash, and then after that, she, you know, Jane chose to create Thule Publishing in the middle of that. So I got to start writing cowboys. I mean, that was fun too. But, you know, she's fantastic in writing and just in life, just a spectacular human.
Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone who has yet to read a Harlequin Presents romance, how would you describe the line to them?
The best. I think that Harlequin Presents, it's just all the good stuff. It's the over the top, it's the breathlessness. It's because everyone is so, you know, all the heroes are so ridiculously over the top powerful. The point of that isn't, you know, that they're billionaires so much as they're so powerful and they're just so involved in themselves on that level that the only thing in the world, like everything in the world is available to them. And the only thing in the world that is a chink in their armor at all is the heroine. And they can control every single thing in their lives except the heroine. And so even though it may seem at the beginning of a Harlequin Presents that he's always trying to control her, he falls for her. And it is like Colossus tumbling to the ground. And she's fine. You know, she might walk away with a broken heart, but he is wrecked. To me, it's sort of like the elixir of romance. And it's because it's so over the top, the emotion has to be so real and so powerful to anchor it. And so I think that it allows you to tell these amazing stories that you really can't tell anywhere else in romance publishing right now. I don't think.
Well, I guess like with time, as time changes and Presents has been around for a long time, like how do you as a writer, I guess, how does the over the topness continue to grow as time changes, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, they get richer. It used to be that a Presents hero could be, you know, the fanciest lawyer in town, and now he has to, you know, own everything. So, you know, definitely there's some inflation. There's Presents hero inflation for sure. I mean, but I'm not the one to ask because I did a Presents hero who was a cult leader. I've done because he crash landed in his private jet and some cult found him and said, "Oh, you're a god." And he thought, you know, that feels about right. You know, he's a Presents hero. So he's like, that feels familiar. Yeah, let's go with that. So yeah, I like to make them. I just wrote a Batman one. He's very, very Batman. I mean, just that's the fun thing about Presents heroes. There's no too much.
Well, in 2018, you released Unleashed with Harlequin's Dare line, which is my favorite line. I'm so sad that it's gone.
Me
can
too.
You tell us, how did you end up writing for Dare?
I had to rally the troops to try to get into that line. They started it and I, you know, pitched some stuff and they didn't like it. And then I pitched some more stuff. And then they said, okay, well, you can do that. And then I got to write this fantastic Icelandic hero and I got to write professors. And then that was probably the least dirty of them. And I just got dirtier and dirtier and dirtier as that went on. And by the end, I think I wrote a hitman at the end. I wrote a lot of DOMs because I like the BDSM books. Those are fun. I love power games in romance novels because the woman always wins at the end. Or I would say the person least that you think won't win at the end always wins. But because of love, because love is the ultimate equalizer. So I just love playing with how that works in various different ways. And the Dare books, you just got to be so outrageous and hot. I just loved them. Now I'm trying to do that. Now I've sort of snuck it in the back door and I put it in my historicals, which
yes.
they may or may not like. The readers might clutch a few pearls, but oh well.
Well, from looking online, Unleashed was the 33rd book in the Dare series, excuse me.
Okay.
You kind of touched on this, but what did the early days of writing for Dare feel like, and did it feel different towards the end of the series?
I mean, not to me. It's funny because I write a lot per year. So for me, it's sort of the Dares are these wonderful vacations in between other things I was writing. And they were fun to write. I write pretty quickly anyway, but they were even more quick because I would figure out what the sexual fantasy was basically, and then sort of roll with it. So for me, they were just a really fun vacation from everything else I was doing. And they're not like any of the other books I was writing. So for me, they weren't different. The line didn't feel different at different points. But although, you can sort of tell when a line isn't blooming as you might have hoped.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We have to know, are we going to get more Viking, Harlequin historical romances from you? And what have you enjoyed about writing for the historical line so far?
I love the historical line. And I love writing Viking. So I actually wrote a bunch of futuristic Vikings several years ago. And so it's sort of post-apocalyptic, futuristic Vikings. And so for me, it was just so delightful to then go back in time and write their forebears. And I also did, during my lifetime as an academic, I did a kind of really intense independent study when I was an undergraduate on Anglo-Saxon elegies. So I decided to set all my Viking books at this really weird time, sort of about 918 AD. And so that's really fun for me, although it's very hard to find sources that agree, but that's fun too, because then you just sort of exist in between. But I get to write actual Vikings, and I get to, go down these research rabbit holes, and honestly, they're so much fun. So I've written 2 so far. I have another one that I will be writing at the end of the year, and hopefully I'll write more because I think they're a lot of fun.
Okay, here's one of my random questions that we didn't send you. So your billionaire presents your billionaire and presents your cowboys or your Vikings. Like, which hero do you feel like is the most difficult to write, and which one just comes super easy to you?
That, it's funny. It's book by book. I wouldn't say that it's a specific type of hero. It's I can never tell, which book is going to be the mountain you don't think you can climb. So you sort of jump in and then it's like, oh dear, this is one of those. But you can never tell. I like them all. They're all fun in different ways. The cowboy is usually more taciturn. He is the mountain in the distance who can't be moved. Whether it's the historical Viking or a post-apocalyptic Viking, they're kind of the same. They're sort of like, the world is mine. Watch, I'm going to beat it into submission. The billionaires they just own everything, and it's fun with them because they can be languid or uptight, and they can be playboys, or they can be, basically, Atlas holding the world on their shoulders as they worry about their responsibilities. And all of those things are so much fun to explore, but all of them can be tragic too if I forget to, do neat things like characterization and a plot.
Well, you've given us so much already. Rom-coms, presents, romantic suspense, erotica, and next you have a paranormal releasing called Small Town, Big Magic. Can you share with us what the book is about?
So that book is actually only half me. It's me and Nicole Helm, who's another category writer. She writes for Intrigue. And so she and I are friends, and we've been friends. And of course, we all write. So Nicole and I write with Macy Gates and Jackie Ashenden. We write actually a cowboy series. It's cowboy anthologies. So it's our 4th one. I think we just handed in our 4th one. So I think 3 are out, and they're all set in a fictional town called Jasper Creek in Oregon, where Macy and I live. And of course, Macy has a million Oregon cowboys. So it's just fun to sort of be not in that world.
Fellow Oregonian as well.
What's that?
Fellow Oregonian as well here.
Oh, good. Yay. So we all, we're all friends, and we already write together. And so Macy and I were visiting Nicole she lives in Missouri, and we're visiting her out in Missouri right around Halloween. And we were wandering around this very cool river town called St. Charles, and it was kind of spooky, and it's, set right on the river. And you sort of peer down these alleyways, wondering if you were actually, was there something there? Is that a shadow? It was very Halloween-y. And I started talking, what if there were witches? And then, they were saying yes. And what if? And we ended up sitting around on Halloween coming up with this world. And we just thought it'd be really fun to write these books that were witches. And, Macy didn't want to take part. So it was Nicole and I, and we just sat around and sort of, spitballed, and then sent a pitch to our agents who were like, yeah, great idea, but no, try that again. And so we spent a year trying to nail down a pitch that our agents thought that they could take out. And it took a solid year, and we almost gave up about 1 million times. And we finally hit it and sold it to Graydon House that fall. And that was 2 years ago. So it is about to come out the end of August. And we could not be more excited. Just so excited. It's going to be great. We love the world. We've finished the second one. So it's actually a series of 4 books, and they're tightly interconnected. They don't just take place in the same town. They're sort of an overarching, world in peril plot as well. So, but
is it set in Missouri?
Is
it set in? Oh my gosh!
It's set in St. Cyprian, Missouri, which is a take on St. Charles, Missouri.
Okay. I'm excited. I'm from. Well, I live in Texas now, but I'm from Missouri, so I'm like, we don't get many stories in Missouri. So
that's what Nicole
how did
said.
you all write it?
You are not setting something here without me. She's like, I am the Midwest writer, not you.
Yes. So how did you all write it together? Like, was it easy? Right? Like, painfully. How did y'all do that?
At first, we tried to write because there are 4 books, and so at first we tried to write. We thought each of us would write our own book, and our agents were like, no. The voice isn't cohesive. So we were like, okay, how do we get our voice cohesive? And so then we tried to sort of do it a variety of ways. But what it came down to is we just jump in and get in all the sentences like we wrote them. So I couldn't even tell you who wrote. I do know who wrote a couple of sentences, but overall, I don't know who wrote what in the book because we just go back and forth and edit on top of each other. But I will say that not only would I not do that with anyone else, these stories are particularly magical, because we just have always had such a clear vision of what they're supposed to be. And I don't normally I just sort of jump in and see what happens. But in this case, we kind of know where we're going. We know the characters really well, probably because we spent a year flailing around in that world before we even sold it. So it's been a lot easier than probably should have been.
Well, was it instant, like, this is going to be a paranormal story? Like, how did it become, I mean, it was Halloween, so that may have played into it, but how did it become a paranormal?
We knew it was paranormal from the start because we wanted to write witches, and so we knew, and also there just weren't a ton of paranormal books. We thought, well, maybe that's the next thing. I don't know. And then it turned out it was, so that was great. We're like, wow, we were already jumping on the thing. I never do that. Normally, if there's any kind of trend, I will come trailing along years afterwards to be like, let me grab the coattail as that falls off a cliff. That's usually mine. But in this case, we were like, oh, there's witch books happening, and we sold ours, quite a while ago. So it seems like we're trying to jump on a trend, but we actually had done it already. So it's kind of really exciting that it's finally coming out.
Well, you also have a Harlequin Presents releasing in August, Willed to Wed Him. Can you share with us what it's about?
You're right. So that was just, because one of the things that's fun about Harlequin Presents is that you can do all those funny tropes that just, don't necessarily work in other places. Like her father died and demanded that they marry if she was to get, I think she has a family museum that she runs. So if she wants to keep doing that, she has to marry this guy. And he runs the family corporation. And he's like, well, obviously the board of directors will fire you if you don't marry my daughter, because obviously that would stand up in court. So they, in Presents World, it does. So they, of course, get married, and they're planning to do it in name only. But then naturally passion gets the better of them. And they are swept away. And I believe they swan off to Italy for a honeymoon, and everything has changed. And I also wanted to do a little 10 Things I Hate About You in there. So I believe she does present him with a version of a love fern.
Okay.
She does, because she's trying to get him to be the one who backs out. Yeah. So if he's the one who does it, right, whoever backs out is in trouble. So he doesn't do it, but she keeps doing crazy things like that. Like she busts into a business meeting and sort of like, let's talk about our love. And he wants to kill everyone.
This is perfect for Presents.
I know. And it's a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Well, what would you say is the hallmark of a Meghan Crane and Caitlin Cruz romance?
I just hope that I take you on a ride. Like, that's what I'm looking for. For me, it's all about the hope and the redemption, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you think you did. You get to find love, and if you open yourself up to the vulnerability of falling in love, then all these wonderful things wait for you on the other side. So that's kind of what I chase in every book, and hopefully that's what readers get out of them.
Well, to start our round out questions, early bird, midday dove, or night owl, what time of day do you prefer to write?
I would prefer to wake up at a reasonable hour and then swan to my desk, let's say 9, and just have a normal work day. Sometimes I achieve that and then sort of end around 5 or 6. And then other days, I'm angrily crying at the computer while, I just finished a book last week and I was, weeping at the computer after midnight because I had to get it in because I could not wake up another day with the book not done. So, you do what you can.
Well, tell us one of the most random places an idea for a book has come to you.
I don't know, because they kind of come everywhere. They can, because sometimes you don't even necessarily know that they're an idea for a book. Sometimes you'll be sitting somewhere and you're watching someone have a conversation, or you're sort of daydreaming about something, or a song comes on and you just think, again, it all comes down to where and how you think, what if that person was in a relationship with this kind of person? What if, this situation, how would I expand that or extrapolate from that? What can I, it all sort of comes together when you know that you have to write, say, a Harlequin Presents. You sort of then slot that in. What if he was a billionaire? What if he's, sworn off women forever? What if he's a cowboy and, is married to his ranch and therefore can never know love, but she just rolls up? It's just all those, they sort of come out of nowhere and everywhere.
Do you set daily writing goals?
Well, sadly, I have to. I prefer not to. I would love nothing more than to just sort of do as the muse took me. But the muse is really lazy, I've discovered. She always wants to be on vacation. She cannot be told. So I usually know my writing year pretty well in advance. So then I have to have writing quotas for days, which sounds tough, but actually it gives you a little more freedom, because I sort of plan it out so that I always have weekends off, which I don't always get. But if I have that window or that sort of shoulder, it allows me a little more wiggle room. If I do feel like, taking a Tuesday to sit around in a coffee shop with Macy Yates, which I do quite a bit of. So then it allows me to have some built-in time so that I can get what I need to get done. So yeah, I do. I have sometimes very intense writing quotas, but I try to have them be a little more manageable.
Yeah. Well, what is one book you wish you could experience reading again for the first time?
That is such a hard question. And I know you sent it to me ahead of time, but there's just so many of them.
Okay.
Recently so many of them. Oh man. Like recently in our book club, we read a Mary Bailow book from her Slightly Dangerous series. And I remember reading it a million years ago, and I was so worried about reading it again because I thought, oh no, what if I don't like it? But I loved it. I had the same experience we read a Kathleen Woodiwiss book as well for our group, and I thought, I am so afraid to go back to that really old school romance stuff. And it's not like it didn't have problematic stuff, but it was like the sweeping, exciting, like, overwhelming. I love that the books can still deliver like that you can just pick it up and be swept away, and your experience of reading it is like falling in love. So you're just absolutely transported. I mean, that's just the best. There's just so many books that I wish I could read for the first time. But I sort of read them over and over again instead, hoping to, I guess I'm chasing the dragon, but.
What's one of your favorite romance tropes to read?
I love an enemies to lovers, of course.
Oh, yeah.
I just love it. Yeah, it's just so snipe, and get a broom.
Who is one of your most read authors?
I mean, I read a lot of Nora Roberts. I like to say that if she's written 200 books, I've read 195 of them. I think it's funny that I feel like she doesn't get talked about enough when everyone I know just reads her consistently and constantly. I mean, she's just so, she's Nora Roberts. There's a reason she's Nora Roberts. Yeah. I was ranting at probably my book club about all my favorite sort of run of Nora Roberts books, which was those opposite titles ones, like Honest Illusions and Sweet Revenge and Carnal Innocence. And They are some of my favorite books in the whole world, and I read them over and over again. I also read a lot of Jane Porter. I read a lot of Macy Yates. When I find someone that I like, I want to read their entire, I just glom like there's no tomorrow. So nothing is more exciting to me than finding someone with a giant backlist that I haven't already read. But there's fewer and fewer of those, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because I've read them all.
Do you have a romance keeper shelf? And if so, what are 3 titles on it that you think everyone should read?
I think Jennifer Crusoe's Welcome to Temptation should be read by everyone always, because it is a classic for a reason. I think that Nora Roberts' Honest Illusions it's an epic saga, and it's amazing. I think everyone should read that too. It's magicians, and it's like a family of magician type people, maybe circusy in New Orleans, and then all the stuff that happens, and it's fantastic. And I would say, what would I say is the third? What a hard question. I'm staring around my room as if it's going to give me a...
The book's going to float off the shelf.
I know, because there's 100 in my head. And now that you asked, I can't think of a single one. I don't know. I'm really partial to Kristen Ashley's, what is that, Man of Her Dreams series. And I would pick pretty much any one of those. Motorcycle Man is obviously amazing. But I think I like all the other ones too. Dream Man, Law Man. There's one other one. Mystery Man. Oh, they're just so good. Can't go wrong.
I just love when we get the chance to chat with you all as writers, and you guys can also nerd out about romance novels that you read. It's
they're so best. Great. I remember reading Kristen Ashley and thinking, I have waited my whole life to read a chick-lit heroine with a crazy over-the-top alpha male, and I have never seen it done like this, and it is amazing. And I think I spent an entire fall reading nothing but Kristen Ashley. I must have read 30 of her books in rapid succession. I've done that with Nora. I read Jennifer Crusoe had more books. I would read all of them too. I just think that it's amazing to watch people play with the same things that you're trying to play with, but so much better than you could ever do.
Well, what is one hill you will wholeheartedly die on?
I have to tell you, I'm a woman of many hills.
Okay.
There's a lot of hills. What is a hill I would wholeheartedly die on? Well, to take it back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as I like to do, Xander's a jerk.
Okay.
From day one. It's true. And Angel over Spike, 100%.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are you an Angel fan? I
100%
love Angel.
And I love the new Persuasion. I'm just going to say it. I love it.
Okay, I feel like that's controversial. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. It's super controversial, and I don't understand why. I find it delightful.
Oh my God. It looks so good. I think all of my friends that are very hardcore into classics, they're the ones that are oh my gosh, this is awful. And I'm but this is coming from you, who is a diehard classics fan. So I get it.
I reread Jane Austen every year. Persuasion is my favorite book, and I loved it.
I definitely could enjoy it for what it was, but I do understand that people are upset that it'd be a disservice to anyone that hadn't read the book yet, and they went to seek out the book to read it. They're probably going to be disappointed.
I don't know. I wonder. I feel like Jane can hold her own. I feel like anyone who picks up Persuasion is going to be swept away by the genius of that book. So I'm not concerned that Dakota's drinking is going to keep them from appreciating Anne.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it did do a good job of inserting the Austen wit in there that I think the visual mediums have trouble doing, because you don't have that narrator, just putting in all the, criticisms of the townspeople and things like that.
Yeah. I liked it. I feel like everyone hated the Pride and Prejudice movie too. And is it the, miniseries? No. But is it good on its own legs? I think so. It's just different takes. I like it a lot. I like all the different takes.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's one of the toughest pieces of advice you've ever received?
Oh, that would probably be when Jane Porter and I were on the phone. I remember exactly where I was standing. And she said, I wonder what it would be like if you wrote a book with emotion in it.
Oh, gosh. Tell us how you really feel, Miss Jane P.
I was like, ouch. She was right. She's like, it's all too analytical. Imagine if it was about feeling. It's like, ow, okay, Jane. But the thing about Jane is she's not usually wrong, when she says things like that. The thing you least want to hear about your writing, she will be the one to tell you. And she's usually right. So then, what are you going to do?
Well, knowing what you know now, what advice would you go back and tell yourself at the beginning of your writing career?
That's such a funny thing, because I think if you actually could go back and give yourself advice at the beginning of your writing career, you would probably not do all those things, right? And I think half of the fun is the mistakes, not at the time, but if you didn't do, this thing, it wouldn't have led you to that thing. I mean, that's the trouble. So, and I think listening to people advise you on how to write is only useful if it helps you write better or more to your strengths. So I think it's when you're starting out, you're so desperate to figure out if you're doing it right, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I think you just have to do it for you, because at the end of the day, you're writing, like, it's wonderful to have readers, and believe me, I feel lucky for that every day, but you have to amuse yourself with what you put on the page. I mean, and that's why you're doing this. That's why you started doing it. At some point, you were just writing for you. So if you can try to get back to that, no matter what you're doing, no matter how much you're writing or how much it isn't working, I do think that is the thing that leads you through.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything you're working on now that you're able to tell us about?
Oh, well, let's see. I finished. Yeah, I guess I have a bunch of presents coming up. Just finished one. Like I said, I finished my Batman one last week.
Okay, so can you expand on that just a little bit, please? Like, I'm getting the Bruce Wayne vibe, but like, is there a literal like Cape Crusader vibe going on here?
Totally. So he's so the heroine went on her junior year abroad to Cambridge, as you do, and met this prince who was ridiculous, and they had this affair. And then she went back home, but when she went to the airport for her dramatic flight home from Heathrow, it was canceled. So she thought, that's great, I'll just run back and have one more night with him. And arrives at his sort of party house in Cambridge, and his guards won't let her into his bed chamber because he's otherwise occupied. So she's of course heartbroken and goes back to Lake Tahoe where she lives, and obviously is pregnant and has this child and has to sort of struggle through. It never occurs to her to even tell him, because he didn't care about her. Like, literally 4 minutes after she left, why would she tell him that she had a child? And so fast forward 6 years, people appear on her door to be like, guess what? As perhaps you've heard, the king and queen of this country died 2 years ago. And thanks to the traditions of this country, the incoming king or queen spends a year in mourning, sort of off in this hermitage up the side of a mountain, stone hermitage cut into the side of this mountain. And it's an island kingdom, obviously, and, somewhere off the coast of Portugal. And so he needs to come off that mountain now, because it's been 2 years. He needs to come off that mountain now, or there's going to be a constitutional crisis and his gross cousin will take the throne. So she thinks, I don't really see why this has anything to do with me, and I hate him, but okay. So she sort of climbs up the mountain, and he claims he doesn't remember her when she gets there. And she's like, okay, great. Then I guess I'll leave. And he's like, well, why did they send you? And she's like, oh, fun fact, like, you have a son. So then he, who has transformed himself into this machine of vengeance, because all he wants is to avenge his parents' death because his cousin, spoiler alert, murdered them. That's all he wants, but he thinks, he can use her and this son of his to sort of like pretend that he's reformed from his rakish ways, to lull the country into submission, while he actually does what he really wants to do, which is avenge his parents. And he literally like sneaks out of the palace and sort of walks around the town, rounding up criminals. Yeah, it was fun. Batman.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
I was hoping, I was like, is there like a secret superhero retelling line that presents us coming out we didn't know about?
Well, that would be fun. Now I don't have to do more of them.
We would read it, just saying. Well, lastly,
presents.
Yes. Like,
yes.
We're always like, what are they going to do next?
I know.
What craziness are we going to get next?
Well, you always hope that, like, I can't write a Sharon Kendrick book where he's the most ridiculous prince who's ever lived. And he literally, someone said this to me once, I don't remember who it was, maybe Carol Marinelli, like a Sharon Kendrick book is where he literally reaches down from the great height of his consequence to lift the housekeeper who's scrubbing the floor at his feet up to his level. I'm like, that's a Sharon Kendrick book. I mean, I can't write that, but I can write Batman.
Yeah. Well, lastly, where can everyone follow you online?
I spend most of my time on Instagram. I think it's Megan M. Crane. I have a Facebook group that I love readers to come into. I think it's called the Crane Cruise Clan or something like that. Hazel Beck, which is the name that Nicole and I use to write our Witch series, has her own Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook page as Megan and Caitlin, but the Caitlin one I don't really use, so it's mostly my page, which is Megan Crane and Caitlin Cruz. And you can pretty much, if you type that in, you can pretty much find me anywhere.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and giving us the opportunity.
Thank you guys. This was so much fun.
Please come back. We'll have to get you and Nicole to come on together so we can talk.
We would love that.
Paranormal book.
We would love that.
Well, listeners, make sure you check the show notes. We will have all the links to where you can keep up with the wonderful Caitlin Cruz / Megan Crane and places where you can get all of her books. So make sure you check the show notes. We will persuade her, kicking and screaming, to come back because, I mean, we just have
I would love to.
Talk about.
Anytime.
Thank you. And Erin and I will chat with you in our next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.